Okay. I think we should start. Actually, it's 9:33. Thank you very much for making the time. As far as I know, I think we have a full house. My assumption is that one or two people who are absent at the moment will be logging in and joining us. So welcome to the second full meeting of the board. Before I start with the agenda, can I formally welcome Paul Leinster, who has joined us as a NED. Very welcome. We're looking forward to working with you as a board and as a team. Paul brings rich experience to the table and he lives in the region. Has been very active on environmental and sustainability issues. The former chief executive of the Environment Agency when I first came across Paul many moons ago. So Paul, delighted to have you. That completes the suite of non-execs. Well, Lynette and Barbara and now Paul, the 3 seats that we had allocated on the board for non-execs are now fully satisfied, and therefore we have a full complement on the board. Welcome. We're delighted also that the board has got a full house today. I'm saying that in anticipation the rest of the people will be there. We have a busy agenda, but if we look through the agenda, most of the items are updates on the actions that we approved at the last board meeting. So it's an opportunity for the team with their sponsors on the board to bring us up to date. There are 2 things that I wanted to alert you to. One is on the strategy that we approved. We're reaching a gateway, and the gateway is to move on to phase 2 of the strategy, and that will need to be approved, and Hillary and a board member will help us go through that. The other is that there is an additional item for approval, which is around the business premises study for science, innovation, and technology. That had not been flagged at the last meeting. It was a part of the detailed work, but it's now formally coming to the board. Under any other business, I forwarded to you Richard Harrington, Lord Harrington's state report, which was published in parallel with the budget yesterday. You won't necessarily have had a chance to go through it, but under any other business, I just want to briefly touch on it, and specifically so you get to think about this. What I want to do, because it touches on the pan-regional partnership and all the work that each of us do in our day jobs, it touches on so many of the areas that I wanted to invite Richard to come and join us in a special 45-minute session with the board and colleagues to really listen to him, and he's offered to do that, to listen to him and to probe him on various aspects if people have an appetite. We'll come back to that under any other business if any of you have a view on it, but I won't actually deflect us from the agenda at this stage. Moving on to the declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Nope, none at all. Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any concerns or questions associated with those minutes? We will tidy up a couple of typos, like compliment spelled with an I rather than an E, but that's for later. I think in terms of substance of the minutes, any comments or concerns? If not, subject to 1 or 2 typos being corrected, can I please ask for the board's blessing for those minutes? On matters arising, there was the one that I'd raised under any other business, which was a question of does the format work well? And there was a desire, I think Jonathan expressed it. Nick, welcome. Jonathan expressed it at the last board, which was whether we should be thinking about meeting face-to-face as we journey forward. I'd hoped to actually see whether we might be able to do that over a dinner ahead of the conference. That did not prove possible because not everyone could make it tonight. But the ARC universities have come to our rescue because they have invited us to a dinner in March, which I hope that most of us will be able to attend for a very meaningful conversation. But nonetheless, that remains an active agenda item. Should we be thinking about meeting face to face on occasions and not always on Teams? I saw no other matters arising which are not a part of this board meeting. Does anyone have anything that they have identified there which doesn't come up in the board today, which they would like to raise now? If not, that covers the matters arising. Can we move to agenda item 4? Pete and Chris, if you're there, very welcome. Please do bring us up to date on the government update.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dipesh. Will do. A few things to flag from the DLUC side in the autumn statement, then I'll pass over to Chris to give a couple of updates as well. We have a new lead minister in DLUC for pan-regional partnerships, as Jacob Young, MP for Redcar, has succeeded to Hannah Davison, who stood down. And Chris and I had a briefing session with him the week before last about your work as a pan-regional partnership. So he's aware of your sort of work programme and your focus, and equally what you're looking to do moving forward. And I think Dipesh and Richard have got a meeting to be diarised with him on that as well. The other ministerial change to flag from the reshuffle is we have a new local government minister in Simon Hoare, who's maybe known to you, given he was a former Oxfordshire councillor. In terms of yesterday, as you've seen, there was an autumn statement. I think there are a few things to flag from that. A couple of devolution points, which aren't directly relevant to the pan-regional partnership, but may be worth clocking, given it may affect the sort of devolved arrangements that exist below, as it were, the PRP in the future. And those are the introduction of a new level 4 tier to the devolution framework, which is effectively a simplified and standardised approach to offering deep devolution to existing mayoral and level 3 devolution areas, which covers things like consolidated housing and regeneration funding, additional skills powers, and more devolved transport funding, alongside the sort of eligibility criteria for when those institutions can draw down those powers. So that's one thing. There is also ministers announced an intention to offer level 2 devolution powers to councils that cover a functional economic area or whole county area where there's local consent to do so. I think on that one, there's a bit further work to follow about exactly how that approach is framed. But essentially, the department is keen to offer up level 2 devolution deals as a core offer, rather than bespoke negotiations for places that either don't wish to or aren't able to seek level 3 devolution during the remainder of this parliament. There are also further announcements on Cambridge 2040, which we spoke about at your first board meeting. I think when we spoke then, we mentioned that the Levelling Up Secretary announced his aspirations for Cambridge in July, and since then the department has established a Cambridge Delivery Group headed by Peter Freeman, Chair of Homes England, who's leading that work, and the group working with the local leaders and partners to sort of develop a vision for the city. I think the key points from the autumn statement yesterday is effectively the government reaffirmed its commitment to this work, and it also committed a further £2 million to address water scarcity issues, alongside £3 million to support the delivery group drive the long-term vision for Cambridge, including by exploring the case for a development corporation. And the DLUC project team that are working on this, I think, are meeting with chief executives on that as part of their weekly meetings to discuss immediate next steps. There are also a couple of things on business support that I thought I'd flag that may be interest to you and your innovation and economy group. One was the fact that DBT confirmed Growth Hub funding for 24-25. The allocations for that are to follow, but I think that's of particular relevance to those of you who are involved in LEP transition. And the other one as well, which may have gone under the radar, but it was announced last week, the government will be expanding the Made Smarter adoption programme, which is a programme that's only been operational in the Midlands and North, effectively aimed at helping small and medium-sized companies use digital technologies to reduce carbon emissions and improve productivity. And that'll be rolled out to all English regions, so we'll cover your region from 25 to 26. I think those are the main things I'd flag from yesterday. I'll pass over to Chris to give a couple of updates on his side.
One thing that we just wanted to flag was some of you will have seen that the National Audit Office are conducting an investigation into East West Rail. It's a bit of a sharper exercise than their usual inquiries. And we've been working with DFT and HMT to provide evidence to the investigation, and their report will hopefully be published in the near future. The report is examining how the context for East West Rail has changed over time, and on DFT's assessments of the economic and strategic case for the project, and the cross-government working to plan and deliver for the intended outcomes. And then on a kind of PRP point, as I mentioned at the last board meeting, deluxe funding arrangements with the PRPs across the country have kind of 6 monthly review points, a mid-year and an end-of-year review, and we use that to kind of capture the progress on delivery and inform funding release. So we held the mid-year review with this PRP, with Richard and Alison, and then Michael Furness, who's the Section 151 officer for Cherwell, last week. Really want to thank them and put it on the record for their input into the exercise. I think it was a really good meeting. It was really helpful to capture the progress that the partnership has made since April, and we're now working with Deluxe finance leads on the kind of next steps. We'll share the record of the meeting with the team shortly, and kind of agree that, and then I think that's usually published on the website.
Great, Chris, thank you very much for that update. Can I just open it up to questions or comments? Bridget?
So just a point of clarification, the Cambridge 2040 delivery group hasn't actually been established yet. The leaders met with Michael Gove last Thursday for actually quite a sort of convivial, useful meeting where we all gave him our arse, but we don't know what the membership of that group's going to be as yet. I'm personally really concerned about talks about development corporations. It's not really what I want. I want to hear that they want to work with us because they know they can get things done quicker and better if they work with us, and we don't think we need devcos. Yes, and I think our opinion of what was in, I think our joint opinion of what was in the autumn statement was that it was pretty underwhelming. We were expecting more. We were hoping for sort of something to deliver some of our strategic public transport systems, and we were hoping for sort of more money committed towards water. But hey ho, it's a start.
Marvelous. Okay, that's very good. Liz, sorry, Bridget, thank you for bringing us right up to date on those, which I think Pete and Chris will have noted. Any other comments or questions?
Mayor Nick has his hand up.
Nick, my apologies, please.
No, thank you, Dippish. I would echo what Bridget said. I've got to catch up with Bridget as well because it's important that we, at a local level, maintain that sort of clarity of purpose. And we certainly did present to Michael Gove when he was visiting recently, along with Peter Freeman, a sort of a willingness to, at a local level, work together. And certainly, as speaking as somebody who has a role in the increasingly world of devolution, I think it's almost at odds to kind of be proposing structures which are kind of reinventing a rather rich, and I think in the area that we're at, a rich governance area, it often gets referred to. But we know what we want and we know what we're doing, I think, and it's kind of but we do want to work together. And I guess on that note, that's why I just wanted to, I don't know if this is the right place to ask the question, but it didn't get a lot of highlighting in the autumn statement yesterday, but it's fair to say that the M10 group, and I'll be speaking to them later this afternoon, we're pleased that over the last year there's been a lot of narrative about the opportunity for further devolution, and obviously in established combined authorities, bearing in mind there may be certain hurdles to pass, where there are already established trailblazers, be the Andy Burnhams, the Andy Streets, and more grease to their elbow. But I'm just wondering, I would really appreciate an understanding in this group as how other areas are moving along with devolution, and are we in the same way as trying to work together across this partnership area? I'm trying to understand how people see devolution, and it's and I'm not saying that far be it me to kind of say that combined authorities are the only way to go. I'll let that decision be made for local areas, but my argument would be is that it's taken some time, but it's beginning to work in the combined authority of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And I would love to really understand how options for other devolution in other areas, who's for it, who's against it, what people are discussing, if they feel that they can be open about that across the whole of our patch, to almost understand how that would then play out inside the Oxford-Cambridge partnership as a whole. Because I'm an advocate for it, but then I would be, wouldn't I? But I would feel more comfortable understanding all your different areas where you see it going.
Okay, well, let's spend a couple of minutes on it. But I would also say, Nick, from my perspective, what yesterday's announcements brought home to me is the need to amplify the collective voice across the region, because together I think we will be much, much stronger doing that. But thank you, Liz, and then Paul, please.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to answer the question that was asked by Nick there. I think there's a fairly muddled approach, frankly, at the moment around devolution. That there are a number of devolution, there are a number of councils that are going through the process of becoming level 3. There was yesterday an announcement that there will be an offer made to some counties, such as Oxfordshire has been cited as one of those counties, that will be offered a level 2 devolution deal. We haven't heard anything from them yet about that. We don't know what it will look like. But I think, Nick, you're absolutely right. And I'm actually picking up what Bridget said, actually. I think the really important thing is that we are clear about what we want rather than, DLUC telling us what they want. We've got to have a list of things that we want for ourselves. And I would urge us to think along those lines, whether as individual counties or collectively, what are the things we actually need to ask for? What are the powers that we want to be devolved to us? Having made that point, though, bearing in mind that there's probably not going to be any money to follow it. So what can we do without the funding? But what do we want to, achieve locally? I think it is really important for us to have a wish list of things that we go back to DLUC with.
Yeah. Paul, you had your hand up, and then Susan, please.
Thank you, Dipesh. Just to note that in my Water Resources East role, I sit on the Cambridge Water Scarcity Group. And therefore, if any messages want to be moved into that group or feedback from the group back to here, I'm very happy to do that.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Thanks for the offer. Susan.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to agree with Liz really about the kind of confusion and process and the importance of establishing what we want out of devolution primarily. And I think the other thing that I would just throw into the mix is that, it looks pretty likely after yesterday's autumn statement that we might be having an election in the next few months. So I think it feels pretty unlikely to me that we're going to have any new devolution deals under this current government for the next few months. So I think we need to, it's all the more important actually that we focus on deciding what we want so that we can make a presentation to whoever's in government next after the next election. And I think realistically, as Liz also said, that's probably less about finances and more about powers. But I think the one thing I would add is that Oxfordshire and Oxfordshire's various different councils has always been pretty clear that, no disrespect, Nick, they didn't want a directly elected mayor. So I think that could potentially be a sticking point with successive governments, because that does seem to be something that they tend to want people to do if they have a devolution deal. So that's something that we'll continue to discuss, I have no doubt.
Susan, thank you for that. I've got two more, and then I think we are probably going to have to move on. But can I take Pete and Jonathan in that order?
Thank you. In the South East Midlands area, in the centre, the six of us are keen to work together on a devolution deal, but I think part of this is tied up in what Susan just said about a lack of clarity. So we have no interest in a directly elected mayor, but we do have some interest in a possible combined authority. But consistently, we've been told now that the government don't really want to get into discussions at first for level 2 deals. So a lot of the level 2 deals seem to have started as level 3, but people have come out and said, actually, we don't want level 3, we'll only want level 2. Quite why they've got level 1 and level 2 if they're not willing to use it is a little bit beyond me. But what I do worry about, and where I would challenge Nick a little bit, is that we do have these 10 mayoral combined authorities, and it's a bit difficult when they've got powers and they push on from level 3 to level 4 and possibly level 5, when lots of the country are still saying, well, what about us? What about level 2 deals, etc., etc.? When we are quite a defined area, we are economic geography, we do want something, but effectively we're being told, well, there's not enough resource for that because we're concentrating on the areas that have already got deals, and it's because ultimately I think central government find it easier to deal with one individual than they do with collections of authorities, and we're being very clear, as I think local government should be, that a devolution deal where the government says you pool the powers you've got and we'll give you some money is not devolution. It's pooling and getting funding. It's not pulling powers down from central government. And we in the centre we do have a slight reaction to sort of powers being pulled up and not very much being pulled down, because that's not devolution.
Yeah, Pete, thank you very much, Jonathan.
Well, yeah, actually, I hadn't
Last
spotted.
question. Yeah.
Yes, I hadn't spotted Pete had his hand up. He speaks for both of us, really. I think it's fairly clear. We are meeting later today of the 6 leaders of the South East Midlands, and it's on our agenda to consider further. And it has, Peter's described, an appetite to pursue along with a bunch of other things. For us in West Northants, it fits with many of the other things we do. We're keen to shape this agenda rather than just have it done to us. And being mindful we're in the East Midlands, we'd prefer to keep strong links with the South East Midlands. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Nick, one final comment, and then I really need to move on.
Well, yeah, I don't think perhaps it's a bit of a challenge to say that, you know, obviously different combined authorities are moving on at different paces. You know, we're all there to some extent trying to do the best by our region. I'm an advocate, and I would like to see whatever type of devolution it is, and of course there's different things, but I don't quite buy the idea that just because they're talking to Andy Burnham and Andy Street as the definitive trailblazers, and obviously a lot of work going on up in the northeast and around sort of East Midlands, that's holding you back. I mean, I've never been told that, and I would obviously be advocating for you all of your areas where you want to be devolution. So if you want me in those conversations where we're having them with central government to saying, are you also thinking about other areas? I'll do that, but I'll certainly, as won over by the argument for devolution as a whole, at whatever stages we could move forward, and when we ever have the opportunity to move forward, I won't stop doing that. But I'll certainly advocate for all of you, whatever forms that you want.
That's very helpful, Nick. Thank you. Can I just bring us back to, that's been a really important and useful conversation. I think for just collectively we come together as the partnership to see how, and it's locally led with central government support. So, you know, if there are things that is a part of the way you, in a devolution settlement, you want to move forward, and there are things that the partnership can help with in terms of some of the underpinning evidential base, etc., we should use that, because collectively this is a part of actually helping the region move forward. So thank you. I think at one stage, Nick, it might have felt as though this was going to become a destructive conversation, but it isn't. It is actually the very power of the region that you spoke to, and the partnership is around that as well. I'm going to move us on, but thank you for exploring those views, and actually some very candid comments which came through. I'm sure, Pete and Chris, you are taking note of some of the local observations. It's important that those are fed back, and you know, to the extent that we're asked around the devolution, we'll be amplifying some of those observations ourselves as the partnership. Can I move to agenda item 5? Which is around the business premises study for science, innovation, and technology. Peter, can I ask you to introduce it? And I believe Arthur is there to talk further on it, and Plassey as well.
Yeah, certainly, Dipesh. Good morning, colleagues. This is a recommendation for your approval for the business premises study under the science, innovation, and technology category. It comes with the very enthusiastic endorsement of the Economy and Innovation Group. It's very much in line with what you've already approved, the data observatory. So by bringing data together, supply and demand, an objective piece of analysis that can be helpful both for local authorities, but also for the commercial side. And it was the commercial representatives at that subgroup who were probably the most enthusiastic about it. Of course, there are commercial studies, property consultancies produce figures all the time, but those aren't always necessarily regarded as being kind of completely accurate. There's elements of self-interest. So this is about producing objective information which can help all of our stakeholders, obviously in relation to a key part of our economic ambition, which is to create high value jobs. Arthur, our lead on data and evidence, is going to explain a little bit more about the scope of the project and what its deliverables should be if you approve it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will just share my screen. Perfect. Is that displaying correctly? Yes, so this is going to be a very quick presentation because I'm conscious of time, just to explain to you a bit more about what we mean by a science, innovation and technology business premises study. So the main concept is that while we understand that the Oxford Cambridge region has a major role to play in the government's plans for the UK to become the next great innovation and science superpower, we are very conscious that we are constrained by a lack of suitable premises for these innovative companies to grow in the area. Lab space has had a particular emphasis in recent years, particularly after the COVID-19 pandemic, where there was a huge spike in demand for these types of premises. But to be very clear, we want this study to focus on all types of innovative and science and technology premises, not just lab space. So we have identified as a partnership that there is a need for us to better understand what the market demand for these new premises is, what the current supply pipeline is, and if there is any justification to forecast the demand for new premises and develop new ones in the areas. So why do we need it? So there's been various interest for this resource from the innovation economy subgroup, as Peter mentioned. We're incredibly enthusiastic about this. It's incredibly important for inward investors, as well as the Investment Atlas project. Developers, economic development officers as well have been very keen about this from the local authority angle. It's very consistent with our strategic aims to support innovation-led sustainable growth in our area, as we will be including elements in the study that take account of constraints such as energy and planning. And I think it's also very important to align this with the Investment Atlas and how we showcase our region as having high demand for these types of premises. And as we've seen from various bits of intelligence from the news, there have been some concerns about the region becoming less competitive with Europe if we can't deliver the type of space that businesses need to commercialize and succeed in our region. Again, this is just to demonstrate this is also quite consistent with government policy, the science and technology framework. To a certain extent, we think the study is going to benefit all of these aims. But particularly ensuring researchers have access to the best physical and digital infrastructure for R&D that attracts talent and investment is particularly one of the key aims that we want to achieve with the study. So again, as I mentioned before, there's been a huge amount of evidence recently about soaring rents for fitted lab space in the region, particularly around Oxford and Cambridge, and huge amounts of development in the region for new space. And I think it's really keen to understand whether or not that demand is going to be long-term and exactly how much we might need in the future. But as I said before, we don't want this study to be just about lab space. Quite a few of those studies exist already. So we really want to broaden the scope out to look at other types of innovation technology businesses. Particularly the 2022 Milton Keynes Tech Ecosystem Report did identify a need for some physical space to allow technology businesses to thrive in the city. And similarly, across the whole of the central area as well, we know that engineering, the automotive sector, aerospace sector are absolutely thriving and key parts of our innovation-led growth. And it will be interesting to use the study to understand the requirements for these types of businesses, as well as life sciences and lab space. So again, I won't go into a bit too much detail about this because this is all in the paper, but these are just some of the key things that we want to achieve with this paper. Understanding a baseline level of the amount of stock of these types of premises that we have, forecasting scenarios for demand and supply into the long term, looking at to the extent to which this might impact other goals, such as the supply of other types of industrial premises, recommending a sound approach to how we might deliver these types of premises in the future sustainably, any barriers or opportunities for growth for these types of premises. Energy, we understand, is a huge constraint for fitted lab space. So understanding, how these constraints might impact these types of development in the future would be very useful. And again, looking into a little bit of detail about the employment and skills implications of these new premises. This is the current timescales that we're working towards in terms of delivering the study. I don't know if I want to hand over to Plassey to speak a bit more about how we're planning to deliver this.
Thank you, Arthur. That was a great summary. We just working with the procurement team at Cherwell District Council to present this to go, if approved by the board, to the procurement team for it to go live. With considering the Christmas holidays, we understand that things might slow down a little bit. But we're looking at getting the consultants in place in February if the board approves this to go forward and start working on the inception meeting and startup engagement to get it off the ground in February. Thank you. Any questions? We'll be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Peter, Arthur and Plassey. Any questions in terms of what we're seeking to do here? Bridget, can I start with you and then Lynette, please?
Okay. Now, I don't want to sound too negative, but I have got concerns. I'm certainly not saying we shouldn't do this work, but actually we need to be really careful about where we get our data from, about the complete independence of the data, and we need to avoid inadvertently creating a spatial plan that could be used to challenge local planning. So in South Cambridgeshire and South Cambridgeshire and Cambridge City are well on their way with a joint local plan. So we have masses and masses of data on exactly the stuff we're talking about here. What's available currently, what the predicted demand's going to be, and we have identified sustainable sites for that future growth. Now, I speak at a lot of business breakfasts, and I was speaking at one with all the kind of, Bidwells, Cheffins, a few weeks ago, where these are developers or agents for landowners, and they're challenging us the whole time because their remit is to build as much as they can on as much land as they can, which runs into serious conflict with our local plan. And our local plan, we reckon, is the greenest local plan in the country. So, moving to zero carbon governs everything we do. So, we do not want an Amazon distribution warehouse in South Cambridgeshire because our carbon emissions are already 25% above the national average, and that's because of transport. So, bunging in great big metal boxes like Bedfordshire have is not what we want. We don't have the sites for it. It will just actually increase the problems that we have on traffic and so on. So I hope that your starting point is going to be coming to the local authorities to look at their data. I mean, by all means, challenge the robustness of our data and our evidence. But if we are going to create something that undermines what we're doing in our local plans, then that's going to be a problem. And you cannot just look at what the demand is and what potential sites are available. You have to take into consideration what the local planning policies are as well. Because if you start conflicting with those, then we're all going to fall out, actually. Does that make sense?
Well, absolutely. And I think it's one of the main reasons for developing this study, because as I mentioned previously before, the private sector puts out a lot of these studies quite frequently. I think the real benefit of this study is that it's something where both the private and the public sector can come together and develop a solution that both sides can agree with, or at least a compromise. So I fully accept that if we essentially just get one of the private developers to do this study for us, they might do it for free, but it won't be a very good study because it will be incredibly biased and not very helpful or reliable. So yes, absolutely want to make sure that we're using a range of forecasts in this report as well, rather than just sticking to one estimate. But yeah, thank you. That's really helpful input there.
Okay, so if I may just add, Chair, please. So what would be a nightmare for me is that the work, the evidence base produced by the OCP ends up being used by developers whose plans we have rejected as part of their appeal process. And we're in big trouble if that starts happening.
That's very understandable. I'll come back and wrap this up in a few minutes. But no, thank you, Bridget. You make some telling observations. Lynette, can I come to you? And
thank you, and thanks, Arthur. So I had a couple of sort of observations, really, maybe things to have a think about. Firstly, I think there might be something about the flexibility of the spaces. So in other words, once something is currently in use as A, doesn't mean it can't then be repurposed for B. So I wondered if that was why you're making the distinction between fitted and non-fitted labs, for example. But I did wonder about flexibility. I also wondered about one of the things that businesses want is kind of some sort of stability. So also, and this perhaps might speak to what Bridget's just been saying, but it might also be about, are these premises available genuinely for long leases? And then also something that you were silent about actually was the digital network, having said in the setup intro to the project that it was those two things. That's absolutely true. So in Milton Keynes we've got a city 5G hub. That's really important for tech businesses. But you are then, as it were, going back to looking at physical premises and maybe thinking about what the network looks like in the area could be useful as well. And then maybe I would have expected to see from Plassey the date by which we expect this to be delivered, not just the date by which we're commissioning it. So I would urge you to set that expectation very, very clearly and make the consultants responsive to that. And then finally, I also wondered about the future looking part of this, and whilst absolutely recognising the shortcomings of talking to developers, I did wonder about whether you are planning to consult with, say, some science park developers, perhaps who are doing work like WEAG internationally, for example, to get a sense of perhaps what might be coming downstream in 3-5 years, and not just constraining us to what currently is. So that's really a whole set of observations about framing the project that I hope will be useful.
yeah, Peter, can I just ask if you want to respond to those? And then Nick, is yours a legacy hand, or did you want to come in as well?
It's a quick question.
Okay,
I'll wait. I think it's best to have all these observations, and then Arthur and I can wrap up.
Fantastic. So Nick.
I don't know if it's an observation, but it was just a point of clarity. We're just trying to remember or understand the membership of the steering group, going forward to next year about this, and a question about, will there be additional opportunities for representation from external bodies to be part of that steering group? And as an offer to that, I know that my officers said, well, from a combined authority area, it was a wide area, we'll be more than happy to put ourselves and officers forward to be part of the steering group. As I say, without knowing who's actually on it, I'm not wanting to replicate.
Thank you for that, Nick. Appreciate that. Peter, do you want to start responding to some of the?
So I think Pete Marland also wanted to come in, and then I'll come back.
Okay, Pete, please.
Thank you. It's an extension of what Bridget and Lynette have just said. Really, is trying to understand the value added and purpose of this, and how it would link into being beneficial. So, as Bridget said, each LPA in its local plan has to commission this sort of work around what it is able to do, what it needs to deliver, and what it is able to deliver, and what is viable to deliver within the local plan. And that evidential basis isn't just on a LPA area; it is on an economic geography footprint. So obviously there are, for instance, all the LPAs, local planning authorities in the area, will have overlapping economic geographies, and those local plans will stitch together that economic demand, and then bring it forward in, as I say, a viable local plan. Each LEP will have done this sort of study, and sort of will have fed into those local plans. What I don't understand is where does this add value to that, and what would the outcome be? So whatever happens within the study will obviously have an output, and it will say X is needed. But if A, B, C, and D local plans don't add up to what X is within this study, what's the outcome of that? Because the only perceivable outcome is that somebody will say, well, that demand is spread out across the whole of the arc, and therefore that demand needs to be met over the whole of the arc. And there is no current feasible way that this group can deliver that demand, because you're not an LPA and you're just turning around and adding pressure onto the LPAs. And that's a sort of technical leading question as to what Bridget was trying to say. I think there is some value in it, particularly as LEPs are moving on to the next phase, having these sort of studies. But it really is about how it knits in with the LPAs and is able to complement the planning process, as opposed to, well, if there is excess demand, the question is going to be, well, are you all going to deliver that excess demand for each other? Is Central Beds going to deliver for Cambridge's demand, etc., etc.? Is Central Beds going to deliver that Amazon warehouse for South Cambridge, because South Cambridge don't want it? And so that, I think that might be the pitfalls of something like that. So it's just about thinking about how this is complementary and not setting up a potential conflict.
Richard, I should invite you to just comment a little bit on behalf of the team to some of the observations which have been made, and then I will suggest a way forward. But could you just comment on some of these things?
Well, I think Peter might want to say a few words first, but I'm happy to follow up.
Yeah, sorry, I thought you asked me to come in, Dipesh, initially.
Yeah, Peter, yes.
So absolutely, on point to all of those reservations and the care with which this needs to be carried out. As it happens, this hasn't been done by the LEPs, this particular study. The South East Midlands LEP did do one on logistics, which absolutely had to tackle those issues of the Amazon warehouses, which both Bridget and Pete have referred to, and we needed to dance through exactly these issues. But the pressures to deliver extra space are there anyway, and the main aggregate data that's available are from these self-interested property consultancies, whereas this is an opportunity to provide as an objective view of that undoubted pressure, but to have more reliable data that's more challengeable, that's absolutely working with any of the studies that have been done and are planned. We don't want to put extra effort in where that work is being, that analysis is being done, but by aggregating it and testing it as objectively as possible, the planning authorities, will have the best objective evidence to which to deal with those pressures which are there anyway. And yes, of course, that will create some need to think more coherently, but the authority still lives with each of you as local planning authorities, but you and your officers would all have better data. And just to reiterate that there is membership that parallels the high-level partnership structure within each of our subgroups. So yes, Mayor Nick, Cambridge Repeater Authority is absolutely represented, and there's an opportunity for more of those planning officers and the relevant officials to come together to make sure that this isn't done in a way that has adverse outcomes.
So, look, Peter, that's extremely helpful. There are obviously some understandable concern around making sure on additionality and value add and not replicating what's already there, but also not putting councils in a difficult position in terms of some decisions they've come to. So how we work this forward needs to be very mindful of all of that. My suggestion would be that we, given what Peter has just said, that actually it will help all of us collectively across the region be in a better position to respond to things. And your point, Bridget, around data integrity, it's not just commercial property developers who are influencing the data, but actually there is some objective evidence. And Lynette, your point around digital is absolutely right as well. So I think given that, what I would recommend we do is we bless the team to move forward to the next stage, use the product of the first part of this to reach a gateway before we take it further. But we need to get to that gateway to see what this will look like and begin to address some of the questions about what's the value of the output and how would the output actually be used. So I would suggest that that's what we do, because there is a lot of local data, but I'm informed that there is a paucity of data across the piece, which has the integrity that we would want as the local communities. So that's my suggestion. Richard, come in first. Bridget, no, why don't you say what you want to say, and then I'll ask Richard to come in.
Very quickly, could I suggest that in order to avoid us getting ourselves in any difficulty, that our officers have a very early meeting with all of the partners, planning directors, just so there's no surprises. I think that early conversation with my planning director, certainly, and I suspect colleagues here, their planning directors, will just, it'll just get us all on the right track early on.
So Peter, I'm assuming that that's something we can do.
Absolutely, and building in those safeguards in this scoping phase is absolutely critical. So I think that for this will be the first time that those planning officers within our particular geography have kind of been able to come together, and that could be a really useful asset in the future. So there's a building a network of expertise across Oxford, Cambridge, which will have longer term benefits as well as this specific study. So completely agree with Bridget.
Okay, fantastic. Susan, sorry, Richard, I'll come to you to be the last voice before I wrap it up. Susan.
Yeah, I very much welcome that particular point, and I just wanted to emphasise the point that I started making in the chat, really, which was in Oxford, the pressure is to turn housing sites into economic developments, into lab space particularly, and we do need housing as well. I think that's the other side of this, is that the important thing to recognise is that sustainable business needs housing as well, and it also needs good transport links, and I think that's where planners, can be quite helpful here in just making sure that people do understand the balance between all of those different things, because from our perspective, the pressure is all to turn housing sites into business sites, and actually that's not the case across the whole of the ARC area, I know, but it is in Oxford, and we need to resist that because we need our housing sites. We have a real shortage of housing. Okay,
Susan, point made. Thank you. Richard, last observations before I move the agenda item forward as to what we're going to do. Yeah.
I just wanted to very briefly acknowledge the point made by Dr. Nick in terms of the steering group membership. We need to make sure that the project governance is right, and we'll work with Peter Horrocks and the team to ensure that we get the right support on that project steering group. And thank you for the offers of help. They're really valuable.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Can I just ask Arthur, can you put your last slide on the timelines back up, please? Yeah.
Yes. Well, firstly, thank you very much for all the input from the board. So these are the initial time scales that we've proposed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So look, that's very clear. Now, I think if I'm going to ask for the board to approve this moving forward, I think the message we take away from this is a cautious way forward with involving the planning directors, taking advantage of the offer that Nick and others have made of making sure that their officers are involved, understanding the integrity of the data and getting the governance right. And Peter, you were on the button in terms of why there is a need for this, but in that cautious way forward, and also, you know, what Pete Marlin was saying around how the growth elements of this are going to be managed. I suggest that you put in a gateway here. So then you need to scope this out in greater detail, and the reassurance on the governance and start those conversations at the steering group. But I think you probably need to have a very clear gateway before the contract is awarded. So can I suggest mid-January you come back with some sort of a written view to the board ahead of the next board meeting? And if we need to have an email correspondence on it, we'll pick that up.
Will do. We'll make sure that happens. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Peter, thank you. On that basis, can I then go back to ask, is the board content to take it to that stage, to the next gateway? Yeah.
Can I just
Pete,
make one little point, because it's sort of important and ultimately important for us going forward, I think, because it's sort of like the value added just doesn't come in the report. The value added comes in the what we're going to do about it, I suppose. Is that evidence will be evidence, but the fundamental question is what we exist to be greater than the sum of our parts, right? And if there is a gap in delivery, I've got no problem in saying, obviously, if Oxford or Cambridge or wherever can't deliver their demand, then obviously Milton Keynes would be more than willing to take jobs and investment, sort of, et cetera, but what I think we probably need a discussion about at some point is the so what, that if there is shown to be excess demand, how do we deal with that, and how can we discuss that, and how do we have a solution to that? That to me is more, that to me is really fundamental, isn't it?
I absolutely agree with you, Pete. But, you know, so what? Where's the additionality? What do you do about it? That's the key. I think around the gateway, when we see that report, I think that's the sort of conversation we really need to have. So thank you. I support what you just said. Anything else? Is the team clear about what the board is approving at this stage?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And Peter, are you
yes,
comfortable in sharing that with where we're at?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what Pete just prompted, you know, is absolutely the stuff of what this partnership becomes about. You've got evidence, and then to what extent do you, the political decision makers, want to work collectively to use that to use that evidence? So I think this is very, very interesting and absolutely central to what we're going to be about in the future.
I think that was a really powerful conversation, and thank you everyone for your contribution and interjections there. So on that basis, and with that approval to the next gateway, can we then move on to the brand and identity update? Karen, I think you're leading there, but just to say that we have an external guest joining us, which is John Till from Thinking Place.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So just very, very briefly, I'm very conscious of time. At the shadow board meeting in June, the board approved the go-ahead to do the scoping exercise for the branding and identity. And since June, what we have done is we have set up a steering group to sort of steer this project through. That is made up of representation that's, again, similar in terms of makeup to our board makeup. And we have also appointed Thinking Place, and John's on the call now, to support us specifically with our early phase engagement to help us navigate our way through this scoping exercise. And what this is about is that John and his team has been going out and talking to several colleagues, including board members, about their requirements for branding, and particularly about the approach that they would like to see us take in terms of our branding and identity moving forward. So today's meeting is John reporting back on the findings of that scoping exercise, having had conversations with our steering group, and also setting out some recommendations to take this work forward. And because of the interest in time, John's got a short presentation that he'd like to run through with you.
Thank you very much. John, I will ask you to keep it to a very tight timeline, please. But thank you. Welcome.
Hi. Nice to see you all. Okay, so hopefully you've got that. I'm conscious of time. So some of you I've met already. Thinking Place is a place specialist. For the last 17 years, we've worked with all sorts of places across the UK, and I guess the key bit is we're very familiar with complex geographies, having done this sort of work in Hampshire, Surrey, etc. And we're currently working with Oxfordshire in terms of their place narrative, which is obviously very relevant. And I think the important bit with this, the key word is this is scoping, so this is not about the answers. So our role in this is very much to act as advisor, and the key word I think is this is independent in terms of our role of listening to people in terms of how they see this moving forward. So we're looking particularly at three areas: the view of the partnership and its priorities, what about the region and what it's got to offer, and the third bit is actually what everybody thinks about a place brand, and is there actually a consensual view on that. So there are three different elements in terms of this that are being considered. First of all, the actual regional geography, and I've called it fuzzy in terms of assets and relationships, because whenever you do this sort of work, you're never following a defined boundary because customers don't view it that way. There is the partnership, which kind of splits into two areas: the collaborations and the projects, and the actual board and the delivery team. I would have to say that in terms of the people we spoke to, most don't see a distinction between those two different aspects of the partnership. So there's been a considerable amount of research and also engagement with stakeholders, 23 conversations, the steering group, which has worked incredibly effectively, I think, listening to them, a business and inward investment focus group. And the one bit that I take out of this particularly is that the findings were incredibly consistent across all of the different ways that we engage with people. So what I want to do with this is just take you through a summary of the findings that will lead us to a way forward in terms of strategy. So I think the first thing to say is that there is a bit of a lack of understanding in terms of the role and objectives of the partnership, and you may say that's not a huge surprise given its relatively early stage. So we have things from very high level views about coordinating and enabling economic growth, all the way through to things more delivery based about the data observatory. There's a very consistent view from the people we spoke to that they felt that the board would benefit from more individual private sector representation. I guess particularly when one of the key things is about attracting global investment, because this is something obviously they are very clued into. Partnership activity, and I guess it relates to some of the things that we just talked about, is very much must be about additionality. People don't want to see duplication. It's about doing what others can't and adding value to the whole of the process and the relationships across the area. I think there was clarity that in this, the place, that fuzzy geography, is the hero, not the partnership. The partnership is an enabler, but it is about the assets and opportunities that are offered across the place. Very, very important and very clear point from people was that partnership success was very much about these C words: collaboration, convening, coherence, clarity, and cut through, almost about creating the environment for success. Some key aspects, I suppose, about measurement and accountability. There were some elements that people talked about that it will be very difficult for you to be accountable for, GVA, GDP, environmental results, etc. So I think there's a word of caution there in terms of the partnership. Audiences, a very consistent view on what they are. I think the bit where there was discussion was more about the regional audience and the regional stakeholders. And I think one of the bits that's important in that is that very much is about seen as the partner's role. It can't be something that's just done by the partnership and the delivery team. So I think building on the point I've just made is that the stakeholders have got to own this. They have to buy into and tell this brand story, because it's not going to be enough for the partnership to do that. And if it just falls back on them, it will fail. And that's the same in any of these other place scenarios that we work. We know we've got a very asset-rich environment, hard and soft assets. People focused a lot more on, I guess, the physicality than the environment, although elements of livability and quality of life shone through, everything from space and to chalk streams and etc. So it is there. In terms of the goal, I think, again, a little bit like we've mentioned before, the goal of the partnership, not totally clear. I think there was a desire for a focus on the big prizes, but we saw everything in this from an international understanding of the offer all the way through to reducing local cynicism. So I think tying that down better is important. And in terms of people's views about the brand, I think there was a real consensus about what makes a good brand and what's important, even though it was difficult for people to name place brand exemplars, apart from perhaps things like Silicon Valley. And when we get to the brand, everybody's view was that the brand story or the narrative is the key bit. That should drive everything. When we get into visuals and names and strap lines, that was less important and should follow what the narrative is. The region, I think absolute clarity that the region needed a brand, and the partnership, because what we said before, the place is the hero here. The partnership's important, but more about a linked identity to the brand. And I guess a concluding point there about don't try and please everybody, focus on the big prizes. So then there are some real key elements, I think, that emerge from the scope that can define the next stage. And the most important aspect of any of this sort of work is audiences. It's usually forgotten about. It's the most important bit. Who are we trying to influence and communicate with? And really this divides into two areas. The first is those are external to the region. And this is very much about attracting interest. So this is showcasing, this is shouting about success, this is demonstrating strengths, capacity around innovation, and it is also about demonstrating a stable and a proactive partnership, which is what people will want to see. And hence, when you think about that, that does require an impactful and a compelling brand, because this is about impact and resonance. It's about cutting through to the key audiences and creating that intrigue and excitement about the potential of the place. When we get to the internal audiences within the region, this is much more about people understanding what is all this for, why, and what is the gain. And therefore, this is explanation. So it's benefits, particularly to young people and future generations. It's about what the partnership is there to do. And it is about cascading information. So a lot of this is about partner activity, because clearly the partnership cannot do all of this. This is about the whole idea of having a partnership and partners, is that there's the opportunity through their relationships and mechanisms to help communicate this and create local buy-in. And therefore, when we've talked about from an internal perspective, if external is brand, internal is identity with a clear relationship to the brand, because the place is the hero. But this is about practicalities. It's about saying what is being done on the tin, and it's about making sure that there is an inclusive approach to what's going on, and that the collaboration and the opportunities are just as clearly identified locally. So that feeds into the next steps. And I think, as I say, the steering group has been massively positive and real consensus of view from there. And I guess the scoping has got us to a very strong position. We know the balance between place and partnership. We know the critical importance of a place brand. And we know the starting point for that is the narrative. The listening and building, I think, is a coalition of the willing is really important in this. So more collaboration and more relationships. So that lies at the heart of future development. The key aspects of all of this can happen alongside each other. So the development of this brand narrative alongside other key aspects of what the partnership is trying to deliver. And obviously all this fits within the long-term strategy for the partnership. And there are very clear reasons about why you would develop this narrative. It is about taking what is something that's quite complex and making it simple. It's about being focused on audiences, which are critically important in this. It's about being place-led. It's about exciting and energizing the stakeholders to want to tell this story. And so that can now lead to a very clear brief for the next stage. In terms of the creation of a narrative for this fuzzy geography that highlights the distinctiveness, the assets, and the opportunities, but importantly, as we've said before, seen through the eyes of the stakeholders. So this forward-looking picture of the place they want to see. That involves extensive engagement to get that buy-in across sectors, across geography, because people need to understand what this is all about, because we need them down the line to be the sales force for this. And it's the journey to a longer term approach of being place-led in various ways, which could lead to anything such as ambassadors. The timescales, if we're looking towards UK Reef in May, are quite tight but deliverable in terms of developing the narrative, but not the visual aspect of that. And of course, this is a longer term process, will take time to embed in terms of the different stakeholders and with the different audiences. So I think the scoping exercise has been incredibly positive. I think we're in a really clear position in terms of where to go next with it.
Okay, John, thank you very much indeed. So here, let me just come back to Karen. What you're asking for is for the board to approve moving to the next phase of the brand development along the lines of John's presentation. John, for my part, please do not start with Oxford to Cambridge partnership. Okay? Before anyone else says it, it is the pan-regional partnership. So if we're doing brand work and we're tone deaf on that, it will really be a huge problem. Okay, can we just ask the board for any comments or questions on the work to date, which has largely been about fact-finding and understanding the tone around the place. The next exercise is scoping out, and in the way that John has shared. Can I just ask if there are any questions or concerns about moving on to the next stage? Okay. I think, Karen, John, I think we have the board's blessing for you to progress to the next stage. And thank you for taking us through the gateway. Now, we have Hilary, we may just be able to, we need approval for this. We have Andy on the Supercluster board, who is due to join us at 10:45. We have 3 minutes. So if you need more than 3 minutes, which I certainly was allocating more than 3 minutes to the strategy development, I would suggest we let Andy in now, wrap that up. It's an update, it's for information, and hear about the supercluster. It's a part of this bridge to what businesses are doing, in addition to what the non-execs will also bring to the table. That we take that on item now, if Andy's around, and then come back and deal with strategy, work program, and finance in the shortest possible time frame. So Hilary, if you need more than 3 minutes, we bring Andy in. Hilary, can we just hold yours for 15 minutes, please?
That's absolutely fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy.
He's probably just being let in by Emma at the moment, Deepesh, but
Okay.
he's there.
Okay. I hate meetings overrunning, but I think we've had some really useful dialogue, and it would have been churlish for the sake of time management to simply rush through it, because we do need to make the decisions as well. Is Andy there?
I'm here, Deepesh.
Andy, very warm welcome. Thank you for making the time to join us. Really, I think this is an opportunity as a part of our business engagement to understand some of what the supercluster is doing, and for all of us to hear from the horse's mouth. So, Andy, the show's all yours. Please talk us through what you're up to, and also any thoughts that you have on how you're working with the partnership.
Okay, thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for bumping up your agenda so I can attend. So let's make the basic objectives today. I know that you've got plenty else to discuss as well. So perhaps your first question is, what on earth is a supercluster? And the second question is probably, what's a supercluster board? And so I'll make sure by the end of today, you at least understand what those things are. And start with who I am. I think I know many of you, but those who don't know me, Andy Williams, chair of the Supercluster Board, 30 years in the life science sector. Spent most of the last 5 or 6 years moving AstraZeneca into our region and evolving their place-based strategy. So quite a strong understanding, hopefully, of the local and regional agenda. I do have a few slides. Have you got those available for me? Sorry, I'd much rather see your faces. Yeah. I thought just
they're on that.
So let's go on to the next. Let's go on to the first slide. Next slide. So what's a supercluster to start with? So we know our region has a number of really strong clusters. Some of them are world leading, and we know that they can grow and evolve themselves and are generally successful. Our general premise of the Supercluster Board contributors and board are that by combining our clusters together, we'll get greater than the sum of the parts. By working collectively on a regional level, we'll be more successful. We also know that across that wider region, we have a population of around 5 million, and that's kind of the size of scale you need to be able to compete in a global context. So places like Boston, San Francisco, other clusters in Europe tend to be quite a lot larger. So by concentrating our clusters in relatively small cities, we are constraining their ability and their potential to grow. We also need to think about this not in terms of, particularly within our region, this is a supercluster is a notion as opposed to a geographical political makeup. So the supercluster, initially, we're going to focus on this region, but we also see it already interacting with Hertfordshire. You'll see that Airbus are on our supercluster board. We very much want to work with the Midlands Engine. We'll sort ourselves out with London as well. But as a starting point, we're going to start our supercluster in the region that we're in today. So these are the total number of Supercluster Board contributors. The board itself is a subset of that. Generally speaking, the larger businesses form the board. So starting in the central region, we have Red Bull Racing, Barclays, Eagle Labs, Cranfield, Bidwell's, and the Arc University Group, actually cross-regional, but we've put them in there. And then we have Airbus over on towards the Stevenage side of things, because Airbus also work closely with Cranfield, so it's kind of that you get your double your bets for those. To the east of the region, the main board members, University of Cambridge, Marshall, again, Marshall really interesting, currently in Cambridge, but heading out Cranfield way as well. Cambridge Ahead, which is a group of businesses, so it's a business body. Then we have Biomed Realty, Brockton Everlast, and Aviva, Longfellow, and AstraZeneca. So generally big businesses and those investment and development parks which are making the major contribution. And then over to the west of the region, we have on the main board, University of Oxford, Oxlet through Nigel, Oxa, who are an autonomous vehicle company, Advanced Oxford, Sarah Haywood, representing a wide range of businesses there. And we'll shortly announce a couple more in the Oxford region, one particularly around life sciences. So we're going to get that life sciences. So what we've tried to do is try to get a reasonable geographical spread, a regional sector spread, and across our diversity of technologies and regions. It's always difficult to do, but that's our go. Now, the first point I'll make is that these logos kind of represent roughly where they are. You see these hard arrows, but I want you to understand that each of those large businesses are not where those arrows are. So I'm going to the next slide, because quite recently AstraZeneca, admittedly one of our larger regional companies, produced an economic impact report, and it showed how AstraZeneca are interacting with our region. And as Councillor Smith there, South Cambridgeshire does pretty well out of this, not surprisingly. So on the left-hand side is what we're calling supported employment. That's either direct employment, employment through supply chains, or indirect employment through collaborations and all sorts of other bits and bobs. That's on the left-hand side is indirect or indirect employment, and on the right side is the GVA contributions. It's a bit of a work in progress. There's one mistake in there. If you're excited in Northampton South that there's 500 supported roles, there aren't. That's just a duplication of South Northamptonshire. But goodness me, 500 supported roles in South Northamptonshire. I wasn't expecting to see that. Expect to see the 2,500 in South Cambridgeshire, the 2,500 in Cambridge. But also where are Milton Keynes North, 303 supported jobs. Luton South, 571, I know where that is. And not surprisingly, Oxford East, 1,700 jobs. So I guess the point I'm making is, although I show those logos in where they consider them, where the big buildings are, if you like, a lot of these big companies are already working on a regional and actually on a national level. So we shouldn't be thinking about them purely in the situ. We should think about that wider context. On the right-hand side, you can see your GVAs, particularly pull out the, we've got obviously the massive contributions in both Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire. But Luton South isn't far behind. Oxford East isn't far behind. Again, there's Milton Keynes North, 18 million in GVA contribution. So this is you can go to the source data yourselves. There's a link to that. What's perhaps important for us to think about is not just, I mean, they're great numbers, but what's underlying that? Why, for example, is Peterborough only 34 when it's not that far from Cambridge in terms of supported employment? Why is Milton Keynes 300? We should be going into that underlying data and understand the relationship even within single companies about how they interact with their region. So that's built on the next slide. Which is a CBR analysis. CBR have been doing an analysis of Cambridge companies for the last 4, 5, 6 years. And what they do is they go back to source data. They don't use ONS BRES data. They go back to company records. They interview people and they build up a record of all the companies with 5 or more employees within a 20-mile radius of the middle of Cambridge. They've been doing that for a number of years. They do it by every sector. So KI, non-KI, they can look at growth, they can see where things are going, what's happened, the impact of COVID and all sorts of things like that. Really useful data set, which has become the sort of trusted source over the number of years. And over the years, the ONS BRES data and the CBR data kind of got closer to each other, which is quite rewarding. I imagine there's been lots of discussion between those two. So we have a good handle actually on how the Cambridgeshire area and how that is growing and all the interactions and the supply chains and everything that goes on there. For the first time, we said, well, and I really need to get CBR to talk about this, is they said, well, you can do that in Cambridge, you're very comfortable. How about doing it somewhere else? Try it out somewhere else. So for the first time this year, they've applied the same methodology to Oxford. And the outcome is pretty much where we were the first year of Cambridge. It's okay. It doesn't completely match the ONS data, and there's a lot of due diligence needs to be done to make sure all that representation is right and the category is right, the sectors are right. But already you can start to see, it goes back 5 years, so you can see how the sector's grown, evolved, who's dropped out altogether in that area. So again, to me, that suggests that we have a lot of that mapping done. It is two things that come out to me from this slide overall. One is, goodness me, the region's not quite as big as I thought it was, because actually that 20-mile radius in the middle of Cambridge and the 20 miles in the middle of Oxford isn't too far. And then, of course, screamingly absent is we haven't done the 20-mile radius of Milton Keynes or Bedford or Bletchley or somewhere like that. And one more circle, we've effectively captured all the KI and non-KI companies. We can look at supply chains, we can look at where they've grown, we can imagine why some haven't grown. We can look at areas where there's gaps in the things like that. So that's kind of where we are in terms of the Supercluster board at the moment. We've formed two work streams, one called Innovation Places, and that's going to be using this data and other data, mapping demand, relationships, locations, taking global learnings. You'll often hear Cambridge compared with Boston, but you would not be able to, you wouldn't compare this supercluster with Boston. It's a different shape, and actually how you bring agglomeration together on a different shape is a different task. It's a little bit more like the San Francisco, San Jose one, or possibly Tokyo to Yokohama. There's different ways you cut depending on how that cluster is going to develop. So that's all very interesting. We need to look also at what's called the halo effect. How do we make sure growth in science and technology has an impact, a positive impact for communities within the region, but also how this region interacts with other regions. I really just see this as a start of a work. This is the front door to the UK. We want a global, we want a science superpower across the UK. You already see relationships being formed between Cambridge and Manchester, so the early stage opportunities in Cambridge and VC funding could move outside of the region. I find it a bit disappointing that the first relationship was with Cambridge and Manchester, and not Cambridge and somewhere else within our local region, but that's where we are. So we have the innovation places looking at that. We have a science and technology one, which is working on the premise of, so I can't answer questions and do the thing at the same time, Naomi, sorry.
No, you finish your presentation.
I'll finish my bit, and I can see there's I hope they're not 5 questions.
There are a few, so.
Okay, thanks, Dipesh, sorry. I'm trying to get through this quickly so we have got time for questions.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
The science and technology work stream. So innovation places work stream really exciting, and a lot of those companies who I didn't actually call out on that first map of who's in the thing, they're helping to contribute. That's all the other universities involved, and that's really powerful and useful for us. The science and technology one, which is kind of my world, coming from the life science sector as a scientist, much more interested in collaboration, cross-fertilization. Can we have landing zones across our region so that people can have a common space to play in when they go in different places? How can we make sure that the VC funds available, often just in Oxford and Cambridge, actually get visibility at least to other parts of the region? How do we cross-fertilize all those? And then, of course, the magic triangle. How do we make sure that the jobs are there for local people and the sustainability is all there in place as well? So there's thinkings around how we make sure that opportunities that are coming or growing and are like to evolve because new industries are going to come through. How do we make so the local community have the opportunity to benefit from those new jobs coming through? Probably not for people who are in the communities now, but either for their children or people who are going to come into the community. So this is not a short-term plan. This is going to change and evolve. My only message I'll say yet again, I want that third circle. Those of you who are within that third circle in the middle, I hope you're quite irritated we haven't done it yet, but we need to work with CBR if we're going to get that done, because they're currently doing this pretty much for free for Oxford. So we need to think about how we can balance that out so that we can get the complete map, because that's what the power of the region is really about. So go on to, I must be getting towards the end. Next slide. I won't go through this in any detail. You can have a look at that. So these are really the areas we know we need to focus and blocks that we need to unblock to ensure that the supercluster can function to its full ability. Not surprisingly, connectivity is right up there, whether that's physical connectivity through East-West Rail or digital connectivity, last mile connectivity. We shoehorn water and power into that as well. We're quite well aware of the local issues and the regional issues in terms of water scarcity and life. You can look at the others, perhaps you'll be excited by. We do believe there needs to be an increased public and private funding accessibility. So we do believe that gain share, that any growth in the area feeds back into the local area so that both the communities can see the benefit and it can help develop the infrastructure. So that is one of the things we're looking at. I will skip over most of those though, we can talk about it another time in the chat. And the final slide is obviously we cannot deliver this on our own, and there's many other bodies involved. You can see we have the Oxford Cambridge Supercluster Board there. We have the Arc University Group as a full proper member of the Supercluster Board, and they're an important member. They bring a whole load of skill sets and organisational skills that we would not otherwise have. East-West Rail and the Oxford to Cambridge Partnership both have observer status and attend Supercluster Board meetings. With the UK government, we have letters of support and endorsement from the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer. We're now just figuring out our relationships with DFT and DCIT so that we can tie ourselves more effectively into that. That's that central government thinking as well. So I will now go and look at the chat. Dipesh, perhaps you could help.
No, I think
that was a wrong
probably,
too. Apologies.
If I ask you to take the slide, can we just assume that you will circulate the slides, or Richard can circulate the slide?
We need to correct one mistake on those slides, Richard, before we do that. But yeah.
Yeah, please, if you wouldn't mind. Okay, well, look, let's just go through any questions that people have for Andy. Okay, well, look, firstly, can I just say, Andy, in what you've shared, there's a mountain of very useful information in there, and the direction of travel is very clear. I think there's a huge amount of complementarity to some of the work that we're doing, and you know, making sure that we work in partnership with each other. So thank you for those. You are absolutely right. The central area does need to be populated in exactly that you have described. What will also be important as a part of how we move the agenda forward for the region is to make sure that we're each of us not sort of replicating or duplicating things, because none of us have the funding or the resources to do what's already done, or you know, do it twice or three times. So how we actually, again, that's around conversation and making sure that we understand each other's direction of travel and what is being done. But this is enormously helpful. I see huge complementarity in what you've presented to the Oxford and Cambridge partnership. Richard, you wanted to make a comment?
Really, just to echo that point and Andy's final slide, which is we've got a live conversation now about how we identify the common agendas between the Supercluster, ourselves, I'm sure the ARC Universities Group, and other bodies, EEH, East West Rail. So I think that's a really important next step, and I think some of that might come out of tomorrow's conference as well.
Very good. Thank you. So Andy, I know there were lots of questions in the chat, but we're going to have to take them separately. But
I'll get back. I'll send a link to Naomi. So the latest cut of the CBR data for Cambridge has come out. So I'll send that to you. It's not in a form to share for Oxford yet. It needs a lot of validation, but the Cambridge data I'll send.
Right. Please do not see stunned silence as lack of interest. I think there's huge interest in what you're doing. It is lack of time rather than lack of interest. So, but really appreciate you coming along to talk to us. Thank you, Andy.
Okay, I'll see you.
All the best. We'll see you tomorrow or whatever in the near future. I know that Liz is heavily involved in it. I know Alistair is, etc. So we just need to keep those bridges going. All right, let's move on to the strategy, please. Hilary, we're already at 11 o'clock. I do want to wrap this up at 10 past 11. So can we give you, Hilary, it's important that we deal with it. Can we give you about 6 or 7 minutes to get this wrapped up, please?
Thanks very much, Dipesh. I do have a few slides which Emma is kindly going to put up, but I will really go through them very quickly and we will share them afterwards. You have the paper. If you go on to slide, that's it. Thanks very much, Emma. So this is very much updating, keeping the board up to date with the development of the strategy that we talked about at the last board meeting. I think the really important point to make about the strategy is that it will provide that link between the vision and the mission for the partnership and the work programme that you're all familiar with, and we'll have a brief update on shortly. So it's that link in the middle, and it's about demonstrating how we work with our partners, including the Supercluster Board and England's Economic Heartland, Oxford, Cambridge, the universities group. So it's bringing everybody together and saying why are we doing what we're doing. If you go on to the next slide, please, Emma. So just to reassure you, there's a lot of work going on in the background. The team are pulling together a document. I just thought you might find it helpful to see the outline for the strategy document. So it will set out the strategic and policy context for the pan-regional partnership. It will have a summary of the economy and the environment, including health, which was something that was mentioned at the last board meeting as being extremely important. We will look at the challenges and the opportunities, and then the interventions and what. So it's a why are we doing what we're doing, and then really importantly is how do we measure it, and just it's come through as a strong thread throughout all of the discussions this morning around the pan-regional partnership wants to be demonstrating how it's adding value, and that's and so the key thing that I set out in the paper today, and if you go on to the next slide please, Emma, was a first thought about this really difficult issue about how things like advocating, providing a voice, developing an evidence base, influencing. We know that they're all really, really important. But how do we demonstrate that? So what I've set out in the paper, and I realise we won't have much time to discuss it today. So if anybody would like to have a further discussion around this logic chain concept or send in ideas, and as I say, we'll circulate these slides. But it's a concept that's been used by other pan-regional partnerships and also in the development of local industrial strategies. So it takes you through a chain. What's the problem you're trying to address? What are you going to do about it? What actions are you going to take? What do you expect to see as a result of those actions? And then really importantly, what outcomes will come about because of the actions that you've taken, and then the impact that will have on the overall economy. So it's a chain that then brings you to the position of, well, so this is why we're proposing to, in this case, set up a data observatory, pull together information, make it available to people, then it can be used for analysis, to support bids, to bring investment into the area. So it's that whole chain of why are we doing what we're doing, and then demonstrating that it's adding value. So just going on to the last slide, please, Emma, which just sets out the timeline for this. So we've been doing a lot of work since the last board meeting. We will continue to work on developing the document. We hope to be in a position to share a draft initially with the two subgroups, Innovation, Economy and Environment group, and then come back to the February board meeting with a document, and share that with our partner bodies for review and comment. So the timeline is to move towards this UK REEF event in May, when hopefully the inward investment prospectus and atlas will be ready, and this strategy document will sit alongside that, and then the branding work that you heard about earlier. So the narrative around the place and the added value will hopefully all come together in May. So really, I just wanted to make board members aware of the work that was in progress, and very much welcome any thoughts on this approach to measuring added value. Thank you.
Hilary, thank you. Peter, was there anything as the chair on this? Is there anything that you wanted to add?
No, and I think it's for the partnership as a whole, the strategy. It's not solely related to the economy, so it's all encompassing. So I don't think I have a particular responsibility in relation to it, but I'm supportive of it.
Wonderful, thank you. Questions, comments? We've seen the status. Are people content on where we're at the moment to move to the next stage? So we're going through a gateway here, and there is a definitive article coming back to us at the February board, which we will chew on with great interest. Hilary.
Thank you.
Marvelous. Thank you. So can I take it that the board is content to move forward? Yeah, sorry, Barbara, you had a hand up.
Just very quickly, actually. Yeah, no, I completely agree. The process seems very thorough. Happy to proceed. Just one question related actually to that previous item we had on the Supercluster board, and because that's an item in the strategy, obviously, what I would like to understand is a little bit more, and whether this is reflected in this strategy more explicitly, how we're going to fit into that, to really make sure that broad representation of all that we are doing across that regional partnership is represented and fed through those discussions. So just a question, and just something that whether can be clarified within this piece of work, or whether there's something on the side that we need to discuss a little bit more.
Thank you very much. And just to emphasise, I know yesterday there was a meeting of the Supercluster board. Richard sits on that for the partnership, and indeed has already emailed me this morning about how we've got to make sure that our work is completely complementary. So yeah, absolutely, a really good point, and we will be working very closely with all of our partners, including the Supercluster board.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I think the board is content to move to the next stage. Thank you. Richard, in the interest of time, can I ask you to take the finance update, the work program update and the finance update in one go? I would normally have invited Peter and Bridget to comment on their individual elements, but it may be, with your blessing, please, I hope you don't mind, that we just go straight into a quick summary and just the status update.
Yeah, I think the only item really that Peter might just want to add a couple of sentences on is the investment prospectus. So if you don't mind, if I could ask Peter to do that, and then I can cover everything else off quickly.
Fantastic.
Okay. We've had back the expressions of interest. We're assessing those as the paper indicates. We think there's probably a little bit more that we need to do to make sure that they're of sufficient collective strength, and that the picture that they paint of the economic potential of the area is as strong as that as possible, and we're working on that, and particularly to Barbara's point just a moment ago about how to work closely with the Supercluster and also with the Arc Universities group to ensure that it's as strong as possible, and we'll be coming back to the board with that at an appropriate moment.
Thank you, Peter. I think we can take all other items in the programme update as read. No particular further comment to make on the environment work. Sorry,
okay.
Dipesh.
Were there any questions from the board members on the programme update? Nope. Thank you. Yes, do move on to finance, please, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very brief update. Essentially, we are the report provides an update on where we are in the current financial year. You'll remember the board signed off the budget for this year and for next year. So this really provides a forecast for the current financial year. You will see there is a note in there that we've worked on with Cherwell in terms of the procurement challenges. We're working through solutions to expediting some of the project procurement that we need to take through Cherwell. It is a challenge. It is a slight risk to the partnership in terms of spending the budget this year, but we have a really positive dialogue with Cherwell on finding a solution to that. And Michael may wish to make further comment, but I think we're on track.
Michael.
Thank you. In the interest of time, no, there's nothing else to add. Richard hit the nail on the head. Yes, we are on track, and we identified there were some procurement challenges, but hopefully in the last couple of weeks have agreed ways forward on that.
Thank you, and thank you to Cherwell for the support. I know Barry and Yvonne have been ardent supporters of the partnership, so thank you. I think that completes the formal end of the agenda for the partnership. Under any other business, I had just the one question, which is Richard Harrington has written to me and in offering to meet, which I'd like us to take up. I'll certainly do so in any event, but I'd like us to take that up. But to do that, I think it probably makes sense for us to do a special session with him on Teams for about 45 minutes, where he has an opportunity to present his report in greater detail and some of the, the new Office for Foreign Investment and how we're looking to attract it, and how we're looking to professionalize it further. But if you look at the summary of that report, there are a lot of connect points with the partnership. So it may be of advantage, and that equally in terms of local councils and things, there will be lots of touch points for all of you for your other roles as well. So I wondered whether there was an appetite for me to invite Richard to do a session with us.
I'm nodding, yes.
If nobody objects, do you mind if I just get that organized? Diarying is always a challenge. I would dearly love to do it before Christmas, but that depends on his diary and our collective diaries. But let's get the ball rolling. 45 minutes should do it. Richard and I have had sessions before, but this will be very, very helpful. So that's it on my part. Any other business from anyone else's part? Look, can I then just say thank you so much. A large number of you are really making tangible, meaningful contributions to tomorrow's session. Dare I say, more than I am contributing to tomorrow's conference. So I want to thank you in advance for the time and effort that you're putting in, and look forward to seeing virtually all of you tomorrow. And thank you in advance. Okay. I'll draw the meeting to a close. Thank you, everyone. All the best. Bye.
Thank you, Deepesh.